Rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight for our executive session between the council and commissioners. Welcome RQAW for showing up. Pete and I have been in conversation over the past few months about different options, different ideas I think that they have, and our situation with our jail, which is not a healthy one, that you're aware of, and just they want to present some different options for us to look at or consider, and so forth. Those that are remoted in, welcome. I'd like to remind you to silence your devices if you haven't already. With that said, Pete, I'll let you introduce yourself, and Sanjay.
I appreciate it, Mike. Again, for the record, my name is Pete Peterson. I'm with RQAW. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for RQAW. And for those of you who do not know RQAW is an Indiana-based company since 1954. We are an engineering architecture firm based in Fishers, Indiana currently. And our primary focus is on municipal projects. So we're a full-service engineering firm that does roads, bridges, environmental work, historic work, et cetera, and a full architecture group who has MEP on staff, along with a full architectural suite. How many people we have up there, Sanjay? I lose count all the time. 18 full-time architecture people with 3 offices in the state of Indiana, Vincennes, LaPorte, and of course the headquarters there in Fishers. Sanjay Patel, who is here with me today, just reminded me he's been with RQAW for 30 years, 3 months, and 3 days, but who's counting, he said. So Sanjay has got his fingerprints on most all of the detention projects that we have done over the past 30 years, so I brought him along as my expert in terms of answering any and all questions as it relates to jail projects, which we have done many. Currently, we're under construction 3-4 projects, I think, Sanjay?
Yeah, 4.
Okay. So we have the Delaware County Justice Center up in just outside of Muncie, which is being done. That's being done as a build, operate, transfer. It's a $47 million project, moving their jail from their downtown area to outskirts and redoing an old middle school into a full justice center and jail. That project is due to be completed November 15th, and it is on time and on budget. The other 2 projects coming quickly to mind are the Hancock County project up in Greenfield. That is being done on a Greenfield site outside of town. Sanjay, remind me how many we're putting in that?
440.
Okay, 440 beds is what it's set up for. And again, that's a Greenfield project started with ground up. They originally had looked at doing the downtown site where the current jail was, with lots of constraints, and we did a lot of studying and work there, and worked not only with the county but the city, and they really determined that the money was best spent out at a new Greenfield site rather than trying to do an adaptive reuse downtown. The other project is Hendricks County. That project is very large, probably approaching $60 million, around the same bed count, 530-ish. 574 beds, along with others that we finished or complete. Currently, all those projects are on time and on budget. One of the things that I think we pride ourselves on in being municipal architects is the fact that we understand that the counties have constraints due to money. And we understand that when you guys are pledging taxpayer dollars to do these projects, they need to come in on time, on budget. You can't be asked every other month to say, well, we didn't anticipate this, we didn't anticipate that, and therefore you get a lot of change orders as you go through. So when we come into a project, we work hand in hand with the group or the county that we're working with, the owners in this respect, to make sure that we're going to deliver the project that you guys anticipated at the budget that you guys want, and we deliver it again on time, on budget. That's a critical aspect when we're doing that. For full disclosure, I sit on Fisher City Council, so I sit on your side of the dais having to make these decisions for taxpayers as well. And I've had to sign way too many change orders in my 4 terms now as city council person there in Fishers. With that, I'm going to go ahead and let Sanjay get into the actual presentation for Fayette County. We did review the study that you had done, so I'm going to let Sanjay take it over from here. And please stop us at any point during the presentation at all, commissioners and or council, should you have any questions. We really want to try to key on, alternatives and solutions that may work here in Fayette County. We're not going to say which one's going to work, that's your decision. But we're here to offer alternatives and our expert advice as to which way is maybe the best alternative for Fayette County to consider, and at least start walking down that path. So I'll give you Sanjay.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Again, as Pete mentioned, Sanjay Patel with RQAW. I'm kind of the lead of the Justice Studio for RQAW. I've been so for a few years now. I want to go back a step and, I don't want to think of this as a presentation as much of a discussion with you as we help you, navigate this process and get to the end goal of the project. So again, feel free to stop me at any time. We'll be happy to answer questions, and as we roll through this, I hope we give you a little more information that will help you through the process, and so that at the end of the day, when you do, get a chance to put a shovel in the ground and build the project you want, it's the right project for Fayette County.
On those other ones, did they own the ground, or did they have to buy the ground? These what places that build out in the
Delaware County had to purchase the old Wilson Middle School from the school corporation, so that building was purchased, so they did not own that. Out in Hancock County, they did own the land. It was actually, they called it the farm, because it really was a farm at that point, but it was being looked at as potential 4-H, kind of county fair ground, and there's still adequate land out there to do that as well. So they had that. Hendricks County,
they owned land. It's for county purposes, so it was just across from the existing jail facility. So from a location point of view, it matched up with what they wanted to do. But again, we've looked at multiple types of situations, and each county has its own unique solution, right? So we work with the county to make sure that what winds up at the end of the day is the right solution for the county. All right. So this probably could be the largest project that Fayette County is going to do for a while. And so you want to make sure that you put all your effort into making sure it's right, making sure there's nothing missed and no opportunities lost in making the project the right project, the project that can be the right budget, the project that can grow with the county and expand in the future, so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're not thinking, I need more beds, where do I put them? That's the last discussion somebody wants to have, especially from leadership, to go back to your county and say, we built this 10 years ago, we didn't build it big enough, or we didn't design it for expansion. We need to do this again. And so making sure that you think of all those things, those traps that some people can get into, and anything that we can do to help you, more than happy to do so. Step one that you've already undertaken is the study from DLC. I think we've gone through that report. It was very well done. It was precise, concise. The information was very well presented. And so the question you've got to ask yourself now is, what do I do next? I mean, what's the next steps? There are a few options that they presented in their report. And again, it's based on a lot of factors that you're going to have to decide what you do. It's money. It's how many beds do I need for now and for the future? Do I use existing facilities that we own at present in Fayette County? And so again, thinking of some of those things, it's sometimes difficult to get to where you need to be to make that decision of, this is where we're going to be, here's what we're going to build, and go from there. So some of the things that I want to present here. So one of the most important things that will help get a project to a successful shovel in the ground scenario is going to be the constructability and the operations of the facility. You want to make sure that whatever you decide to do, you're building it so that from a price standpoint, from a future growth standpoint, you're building it so that you can get that shovel in the ground. So you're not building too big or too expensive, and so you want to think about that very carefully. Operations is another huge factor that you're going to have to think about. A building like this is a 24/7 operation. Every day you're going to have people come in, work there, and it takes a lot of people to operate that facility. On an average, a single control point, and I'll talk about this in the future again, could require between 8 and 10 people to operate. At $100,000, you're talking about $1 million a year to operate a single control point in a jail facility. So think very carefully about how many control points do you want to have in a facility like this. And when the time comes to expand, how do you expand a facility, add more beds, without adding that kind of operational costs to the project? So important things to think about. Here is a model, let's say, of a pod that we've used. I want to talk a little bit about the flexibility of design, about the operations, about control, about efficiencies in staffing, efficiencies in construction, and things like that. Some of the models that you see in front of you, I'll feel free to, if you want to pass those around. But what it is samples of the pod that you see in front of you with different pies and wedges of.
Sanjay, we could afford this.
Yeah, we'll make sure. We'll make sure this is scaled up so that you can actually put people in that. So again, this is our sheriff. I told him the wrong time.
Okay.
You want me to start again? I can do that.
You're good. You're good.
I thought it was 6 for some reason.
Okay. So again, this is parts and pieces that, again, will fit in a modular pod that gives you the flexibility to pick and choose what you want out of this. How many beds do you want? How many support spaces? How many classrooms do you want? Do you want dormitories? Do you want 4-man cells? Do you want 2-man cells? Again, trying to give the county the flexibility to pick and choose, make sure that the jail is designed to their specific needs, and then the costs automatically are reflected in that. So again, using cells is definitely the most expensive option. You have the ability to use dormitories, which does save you some monies and in the construction of the project. Providing support spaces in the middle of the core is something we found is to be the most effective way to control operations. What we like to advise, or at least suggest to you, is that you think of a pod as a self-contained housing unit where all the services that inmates need are provided for them within the pod itself. That limits the movement of inmates from their sleeping areas to the program areas to medical to classrooms and things like that. And so it provides for a level of safety for the staff and for the inmates. It minimizes on resources required to move inmates from one space to the other. So what you see here in the middle is a central core with a corridor that leads to it. And this could be from the administration portion of it. This could be from an adjacent pod. So again, you have the flexibility of how you connect a housing pod to other parts of the building. What you have around, where's the mouse? Okay. So this wedge in the middle here is what you see in gray in that model that you have in front of you. That's your support core. And that has the flexibility of having padded cells, isolation cells. You could have a medical wing in there. You could have classrooms. You could have 2 classrooms. So you have the complete flexibility of taking that wedge and making it as customized as you want to make it so that you get exactly what you need out of it.
Can I stop you?
Yeah, sure.
So, in my head, I would think that central point would be a control point for like the jail officers, jail staff, but it looks as though it might be in that support wedge as you were talking about, like so all this going to be monitored through cameras mainly?
Absolutely. So the intent is to use technology and leverage technology as much as we can right now to supervise, to monitor, to control movement of inmates and also what they're doing.
So one last question. I apologize.
Oh, sure.
So is there a potential to reduce staff and not eliminate? See, we're not at the number we need to be, and we know we need to get there. Would this potentially be a solution to us to, I guess, meet that criteria or reduce that criteria to where we are currently staffed, if I'm making sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So to answer your question, the staffing of a pod like this is absolutely the most efficient way to manage that population. You could have had 300 beds around a single control room, and it's up to the sheriff to be comfortable with what staffing levels he needs to manage that population. But we've done it in a couple of counties where we've had one person sitting in the middle of that control room managing 300 people. And if there are a couple of backup situations where you have 2 pods next to each other, you don't have to have both pods manned at times in the evenings or the nights. At that time when they're locked down, one pod could remain unmanned and you could transfer control to the other pod. So you do have...
I'd like your input on, let's say like a layout like this, what would, not to put, I guess I am putting you on the spot, but for,
Well, obviously you have somebody that's monitoring the cameras and like we do now, and that's popping doors and things like that. And then obviously you got to have people that's going to deal with inmates.
The rovers and
Yeah.
the-
So now we have a minimum of 3 unless we spike over 150, which has happened, then we go to 4. So, I mean, I would assume that the control officers, the same setup as here, they're never going to leave the control panel, right? Because there'd be no, that would obviously be a security risk. So, but I see how the layout's completely different because now we have 2 separate
Control
pods,
yeah.
and then you have central control.
Right.
So, I mean, just to have one control where everybody could just leave there to go deal with that.
And
I can see where that would save on, and what you're talking about, Mike, kind of staying where we're at. And
yeah,
coming in
I'm not trying to
compliance.
reduce people,
Right.
say, to limited jobs. I'm trying to address the report from the jail inspector report where it says that we need to, add so many people per year to get to that magic number.
Right.
Maybe that magic number isn't here anymore. Maybe it's down here, closer to where we're currently staffed.
Right.
And that's, I think the goal would be to double your capacity or whatever to get to that recommended number and not have to add any staff. That would be the ideal situation. And so, like I mentioned in the beginning, that is going to be your most expensive cost throughout the life of the building. And so, at least to start out with, design it so that you do not have to do that. And in the future, sometime at some point when you're filling out the pod and you do feel the need for an additional staff rover member or things like that.
And again,
you
so
can add that.
what we're starting out here is we're starting out showing you where jail design has gone to in today, right? Jails were designed in a certain way before, and they have become very inefficient, right? And that's what Sanjay's really referring to. So we haven't gotten to Fayette County's situation now. Not saying that you can't retrofit and you can't do other things here or there, but you're going to lose some kind of staffing flexibility and operational efficiency by spreading out control points, right? The more housing units you put in different buildings, you have to create control, and that control takes officers, right? And it also has movement. So not only do you get staffing inefficiencies when you have different control points, but you also get security concerns when his officers have to take, a prisoner from X position to Y position. So we're starting here, we're showing you guys where new design has taken it to. I'm not saying this is where you guys are going to end up. I'm saying this is where the design would be if you're going to build a complete new housing pod. And we're not saying that's a solution yet. We're saying this is where design is in Indiana, which has been going on for the past 6, 7, 8 years now, right? And we continue to improve on this design as we go. So starting there, we're going to kind of work into where you folks are at. With this particular pod, we found this to be the most efficient way to operate a jail, right? Putting as many prisoners around a single control point and putting the bifurcation walls in there, the separated walls, as you can see, because now you're getting classification, right? You can classify prisoners correctly, and I know that's got to be an issue for the sheriff currently, right? In our jail designs, the way those bifurcation walls go, they go all the way to the control point, and there's not a double pane class switch. I know I'm jumping ahead on Sanjay here a little bit, and I apologize, right? So there's a number of features that go on with this design, right, that make it operationally efficient. And not only from the manpower efficiency, but when you're building, obviously, from the ground up, you're grabbing all the new technology as it comes into, as it relates to electric, heating and air conditioning. We've seen people put solar up on the roofs. There's a chase that goes behind this particular design where all the maintenance that you would do on any one of these particular cells are done from the rear, right? So you never have to let anybody in. Currently, I'm sure the sheriff needs to let somebody in to do any maintenance in there. That requires an officer or two to go in with a maintenance person so that they go and do maintenance on a jail. So it takes away 1 or 2 of his officers, but more than that, they need to count tools in and count tools out. Additionally, what we've added onto all these jails is called a Willoughby water system, okay? And this allows complete control of water usage by the sheriff's department that says you are going to use your shower for an hour and there's 6 minutes apiece, blah, 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 and you can go ahead and regulate water. You can regulate how many flushes they have. You can regulate everything. We just put this in Delaware County. The payback on the water system is 3 years. After 3 years, Delaware County will save in excess of $50,000 a year just in water and waste usage, stormwater usage, or waste usage, what I'm saying. So again, this is a way to build something from the ground up that's going to be the most efficient method that you can do in current day standards. I'm not saying you can't redo the one you have. That's certainly a possibility for the county. But again, we wanted to start here to show you where current design of what I would call institutional correction facilities has gone to.
Isn't it kind of wasted space though, or you kind of, it all goes into the point, but you have some areas, what do you do with that space?
So typically the area immediately around the control room is your access points from the center core into the day rooms. So you do not want people gathering there, mingling there. You want them to be stepping away from the front of the door. So that's why it kind of automatically, the design automatically lends itself into what is correct, what's right for the operations in the facility. The space as the wedge gets bigger, that's where you put your tables, that's where you want to put your inmates, so that when you're on this elevated control room, you can see them and not have to look down right immediately outside the door.
There is space requirements as it goes to DOC that says a certain amount of prisoners require a certain amount of space. Up here in front of you, we've given you kind of what jail cells are being done as. Jail cells are no longer really being built out of bricks and mortar. They're being built in Georgia and other places, but primarily Georgia, and they are a single contained unit that looks a lot like this right here. So they come in and so the secure part of the jail is that piece, because it's all 10 gauge, right? 10 gauge?
12 gauge.
12 gauge, excuse me, 12 gauge, and they stack them on top of one another, then they're welded together. They go in like Lego pieces as you go in. It's fascinating to watch where this current standard is. So, the secure part of the jail is not the outside perimeter of the building anymore. Secure part of the jail is the back part of the jail cell, right? So now with that chase behind and all the maintenance behind, it's done because it's easy to do, it's efficient because they can get to it, because you also don't need to put an officer with them. And again, you're getting state-of-the-art, what I would call high-end, energy-efficient systems that are going into the building, which really is where the cost is for the county. Cost is in putting manpower in there and paying electric bills and paying water bills and paying all those kind of things. So you're really kind of ramping up from that method. It does come at a cost, but longevity, if you take a look at it, the savings are going to come back to the county just by building an efficient building.
So you going with LED lighting now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because then you don't have to deal with your heat cost and your
Yeah.
cooling will be going down because you're not with incandescent, you're creating heat to the space and so forth.
Right. Again, systems that we will use in the building will be the current state-of-the-art, systems for electric, for water management, for HVAC systems, for exhaust controls and things like that. Again, we've had instances where somebody's let off a, pepper spray or something in a room, and next thing you know, it's all over the facility and you got no control on it. You've got COVID coming into a facility. How do you prevent the inmate in the next day room from catching it? So again, thinking about, current situations, how do you prevent that from happening? Putting negative air pressure so that each day room is independently exhausted and you're not transferring air from one day room to the other or to the administration. So again, we've got to think ahead of time. We're trying to plan for the future, and so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when you want this facility to be relevant to Fayette County, we've incorporated all those design elements as best as we could to that point. So
I want to go on a limb and just assume that with putting in today's technology as far as lighting, heating, air conditioning, so forth and so on, I would think you could operate that facility at less cost than that facility and increase your capacity. Would that be a fair
Well,
statement?
I think you can certainly increase the jail population capacity for sure,
Yeah.
right? As it relates to the savings, I don't want to go out on a limb, Mike, and say that you are, because I have no idea what your bills are now. I can tell you for a fact that from the places where we have been, with the amount of people that we're housing for them in that single control point, there is an operational savings to those jails.
yes.
Question. The area down in the bottom of the block, or the square,
Uh-huh.
that appears to be meeting rooms and training rooms or whatever. Is that area, when you build that, are those walls easily moved
So
over time? For instance, we have a jail over there that is an incarceration building only. Put them behind the locked door and that's what you get. We can't address today's issues with drug substance abuse. We can't address mental illness like we need to. Where the newer designs take into consideration those types of prisoners and so on and so forth. But as time changes, these rooms might not be adequate for what we need as times change.
Right.
Can they easily be moved around?
So
Unlike
typically,
the cell block itself. I mean,
so there are a couple of ways to look at it. Typically, for detention type facilities, you're building walls, systems that are a lot more robust and strong than conventional commercial construction. What we'd like to suggest in that case is to think of spaces more as larger spaces with furniture maybe that helps the current need. And in the future, then that furniture can be taken out. The walls themselves become a little difficult to move in the future. But again, thinking of spaces to be more flexible rather than designed for a specific purpose. You want to think, in classification, in classrooms, in spaces. Again, making sure that you're not being so down to the granular level and designing it for that need. We're trying to keep it open so that in the future you can adapt it to some extent.
Again, this particular design you have here in front of you, we've designed at 250 up to 300 inmates, right? And that corridor which you're referring to, has the meeting rooms or doesn't need necessarily meeting rooms, or then you've got isolation cells, padded cells, attorney breakout rooms if you need those. You've got medical if you need there. All for you want to decrease movement of prisoners as much as possible for his deputy safety and their safety as well. So with that, it's a pretty self-contained unit area as it is. So we try to design that not only for today's needs in a county, but further needs that you're going to have. Because like Sanjay started out originally, the last thing you want to do is say, I'm going to spend all this money of your taxpayer money and then come back and go, oh, we goofed, we didn't build it big enough, right? Or we didn't give our room itself for expansion, right? Things of that nature. So this particular pod, they're about 35,000 square feet, 37,000 square feet is what the footprint is on these buildings.
When you talk about that pod being, would you say 250 to 300?
Correct.
Could hold, and it's
35 to 39,000 square feet.
Square feet.
Yeah.
How small of a pod can you theoretically do?
Okay, so good
And
question.
still be efficient? I mean, can it be 150?
And this is going to be something that's going to come up.
Okay.
You can build a pod for 150 beds.
Mm-hmm.
The day you need to have
We'll take the
151 beds, you're adding another control point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is going to be where the expense is, because you're adding staffing at $1 million a year just to run another control point. What I would recommend you do is, if you want to build only 150 beds, and this is further in the presentation, but I'm glad you brought it up, build half the pod. Don't build the other half. You don't even have to build the shell. You can just draw a wall, a line down the middle, and build your 150 beds.
Okay.
And then you want to add more beds. 10 years from now, you come in, add all those other beds. Your control room remains the same. It's still in the middle. You still got all your core support spaces that you
That's
need.
what I was after. Just
And
how do you build to expand?
Hamilton County recently built an additional jail pod. I think we finished that up 2 years ago. What their decision to do was to build out 50% of the pod. So 50% of the pod is occupied by housing. The other 50% is wide open. They put the foundation
Shell
in.
there.
Yeah, put the foundation in. They put the building around it. It is complete open space. Currently, what they're housing in there is some public works stuff, and 2 wooden
Bridges.
are sitting in the other half of the pod right now because they had storage space to put it. But when they need additional prisoners or additional population needs, there's a door in there, and these cells, which are represented like this. Okay, that's the way they come in. They come into the back of a flatbed truck. They put them on little dollies, and they roll them right into that door, and they pop them into place. They put another one on top. They tack all them together, and they slide them in where they're going. So they can easily build out the other half of that jail pod, probably within a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, I would think, without too much of a
Once the
problem.
cells are ordered and delivered, it'll be a quick process. And the thing is that when you do it that way, you're not disrupting the other half that still has
Still
inmates in
operational.
it. You're not worrying about construction workers in there, you're not worrying about inmate safety. You're just building it on the other side, and it's fast, it's quick, it's...
Our recommendation when we look at this is if you decide to go with a pod design and not do an adaptive reuse of the buildings you have, is you should build at least a footprint for an entire pod, right? Whether you build it all out internally, that's entirely up to the county
Or on
what his needs are and what your needs are from a cost perspective. This particular design allows itself to be a little bit like the Lego blocks, right, that you're building off of. But our recommendation is you build that building 35 to 39,000 square foot footprint and build out however much of it you need or however much the county can afford. So when you have to come back and add, you're not looking at a new site. You're not looking at doing all new construction. You don't have to move prisoners into temporary facilities and things of that nature. You can easily start going to get added beds very quickly once the need arises.
And this allows for like men's section and women's section. And I know Joey says sometimes, like you brought up, like with mental, well, due to drugs or if they have mental issues where they're divided from the other population, that's all in that area.
These are all sight sound separated. So the unique thing about our design, which Sanjay does, I'm stepping all over him, I apologize. The unique thing about this is if you look at those bifurcation walls, the little pieces of pie there, you can have men on one side and women on another because they're sight sound separated. The doors that are internal to that little kind of circle there in the middle all have doors with closed windows on them. There's a window that can open from the outside and look in, and there's a pass-through if you need to get something in there for food, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, you can't look across. We don't use a double pane glass system that you'll see in many jails, where the control room has glass, and then there's an open area with another pane of glass there. The problems that you run into there is you run into classification problems because now you've got glass everywhere. So you can't put women and men directly across from another. You just can't do it, right? So with this design, we take the walls right up to that control point, so there's no sight, sound, hearing between these areas. So women and men could go right next to one another in those areas. And again, you're dependent upon how the sheriff and his staff want to go ahead and classify these people. That's why those pods are different sizes. You've got 2- and 4-man cells in there. You can use dormitories, etc., for maybe the less violent or the more well-behaved prisoners in there. We do a lot of dorms and things too, which are a lot more cost effective. But again, from the sheriff's point of view, if he can't use all those beds there, he needs to lock everybody down, you need more cells. My point is there's lots of room for classification when you're doing this type of thing. So it gives him the flexibility to put the people in the right place at the right time and keep them there.
And it being in the center, maybe I'm a claustrophobic sort, but if the control room's right there, can they get out real fast if they have to? I mean, I don't know.
Are you talking about the staff?
Yeah.
Okay. So the control room is on the second floor of this. So what you're seeing here is the first level where inmates would be. Above this level would be the control room that's looking down into the day rooms. And so there's a separate stair that goes from that control level down to the inmate level, and then they can go address any issues that might be occurring down at that level. So there's no direct threat from inmates to the staff on that elevated level. But the inmates the staff does have the ability to get to where they need to be quickly, and they also have the ability to address needs directly from the control room.
That's a good look at it.
Yeah. So this is the same pod that you saw the model of. This is an actual built situation. So what you see here is one wedge. You see the cells in the back, 2 stories high. You have a stair that goes up to that mezzanine level and connects between day rooms. You see the clear lines of sight. There are no, blind spots for anyone looking into this day room. The mesh that you see at the front, this mouse, okay. So this mesh that you see in front of this is full height, so you're not going to allow for somebody to be pushed or, voluntarily jumping over that mezzanine and taking a swan dive down in the concrete below. So, you got to think of those things. It's a liability for the county. If something happens, the county gets liable. So whatever we can do to prevent that kind of situation is something we're looking at.
And to the right, that's the look from the control room up at the second level.
So that same room, as you can see at the bottom inset, So that is the inside looking back at the control room. That's the control room elevated on the second floor. That's that door on the first floor that we showed you in the previous image. So this is looking down into each of the day rooms. Again, that's why you want to keep inmates away from the front of the cells. You do have, front of the control room, but you do have cameras and you do have mirrors that allow you to look down. What you see here also is a port that allows a staff member to use either rubber bullets, pepper spray, whatever, to control an event in a day room directly from the control room. He doesn't have to go down the stair, go through the door at the lower level to do that. And so he has the ability to control a situation directly from that level. With exhaust systems that are in place, you can evacuate that day room itself without letting that spread to a neighboring day room. So again, giving the staff the ability to manage that with fewer staff, but efficiently and without the liability issues that.
And really, that design came from when we did Greene County. The sheriff down there wanted direct access if he needed direct access. So Sanjay and his team designed this knockback door, as I call it, for direct access to those prisoners. If that particular day room is getting out of hand and there's a problem in there, they're confined to the day room number one, but they can all be up at the front end of the door. The last thing he wants to do with his team when they're there is go in there when they're at the front end of the door. So now from an elevated position, they can use a direct access point to knock all of those prisoners back so his team can enter safely and get things under control. So that's why those were put in there, and they're in every design we've done since then.
Some of the colors you see here, we're starting to think about these.
I think you
All right. So one of the things that you'll notice is some of our pods are becoming more, we're trying to make them more normalized. Unfortunately, our jails are now becoming, the default place where, mental health and people that should be somewhere else are finding themselves in the facility. What can we do as designers, as architects, as engineers to make the spaces a little more normal, less institutional, give the inmates a better chance of recovery and getting back into society. And so again, we always constantly thinking, okay, what did we do last time? It was a brown and beige building. Is there an opportunity to do something different to make the space a little more friendly to the inmates and even the staff? I mean, the staff are there 24/7. Whatever you can do to address the well-being of the staff and the mental health of the staff, so there's not a constant turnover where they keep going somewhere else. If you can hold them on for a longer term, I think it works well for the county.
Dennis Quakenbush, the Hamlin County Sheriff, which I don't know if you know Dennis or not, but Dennis says he has more requests in his jail to go work the new pod than the old pods. And there's colors all throughout that pod there. So additionally, from an identification standpoint too, a prominent pod, they're obviously going to be numbered by the sheriff and his department, but you can also identify them by the colors too, because they're all different colors going around.
One of the big things is in operations is the maintenance of the facility. Anywhere, like Pete said, the rear chase around the cells that you can see on the right photograph, that is all your plumbing, mechanical, electrical access to the cells themselves. So you can have maintenance being done in those chase spaces without access to the inmates. You don't have to count your tools. You don't have to worry about contraband getting passed through. So this is pretty much the default standard on how you want to allow for maintenance control around the jail pod. And the bottom line is if you do provide ease of maintenance to a facility, it does get taken care of. Nobody's going to say, oh, it's difficult to do, so I won't worry about it.
These chases are wide enough to get a scissor lift behind them, so you can take a scissor lift behind there and drive that around. So, and again, he's got inmates in there who are trying to destroy the facility 24/7. So, and they will put anything in the world down, a toilet and everything else to do that. So these all take that into account. There's easy ways and traps, et cetera, to get all that kind of taken care of very easily. The other thing which I talked about in that water system, that Willoughby water system, he can shut down a single cell if he wants to. He can shut down the entire facility. He can shut down a block. He can shut down anything that he wants to do because it's completely controlled. If he wants to go in there and do a search of that facility, typically in most toilets, when you lose power, you get one flush, right? Whatever's in there is going to flush down. With this particular system, once he flips the switch, they can't flush anything down. It sits there. He'll find every bit of contraband that's sitting in the top of that toilet they're trying to get rid of just due to that water system that's in there.
Some photographs of some of the support spaces that we talked about in the earlier slide. You could have a classroom, you could have multiple classrooms, you can have a view from the upper level control room looking down into classrooms. So again, giving you the ability to manage and observe the spaces at the inmate level. Conference rooms, attorney visitation rooms, all of those can be in the center core itself. Again, padded cells, with natural light, so you can use this for long-term holding too. Medical areas, again, built into that core. So again, you're limiting the amount of movement that inmates have to go through to get to these support services. It's all within the pod. It's easier for inmates. It's easier for the staff to manage. Again, providing all of this within the pod itself.
So does this account for like an administration side too, or is that included in that pod and the pie and all that? Or is
The
that a whole separate-
administration are typically built on an additional wing or an additional site. Depends on how you need to do that. We've done it a number of ways. It depends upon the design which we do. It depends on whether we're just adding a pod to a jail or we're building it ground up. The one in Hancock County actually has an administration wing that sits out front of it, is what it does. There also is a large area in between because they built what I would call a super pod.
Yeah.
Was that a fair way to do that? So they actually put two pods together, kind of back to back, with a large administration wing in the middle and a sally port off to the side. Then they added, Hancock County came back and said, we want to add full sheriff's department, so he has all of his officers there, including investigation, et cetera, all housed right there at the same facility, but in a different building. This really is a housing pod for sure.
Here's a
So otherwise, we could, in theory, we could take our existing jail, put that pod in conjunction with it, attach it to that, come in and renovate our current jail for community corrections and more teaching, more
programs, more
program.
Right, absolutely. So there's
and maintain our administration in our existing jail, but just add our secured area as a new pod.
As long as you have the footprint.
I believe you do have, I'm looking at the site, you do have it. So
I mean,
definitely that's an
whether
option.
it's a half of a pod or a full pod or at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, because chances are, we could possibly do a half a pod, make accommodations for a more advanced community corrections program in our existing jail.
Mhm.
And have a less need for prisoners in the secured pod.
Because you're putting them in community correction. Yeah.
In theory. I mean,
Yes.
I'm just throwing ideas at you.
You can do all that, what you said, Gary, for sure. Once you got into the actual project and started working in conjunction with Sanjay and his team, that's exactly what they go in there and do. They
Okay.
look at all those options specifically, and we try to drive down to where the costs are going to be, where the efficiencies and inefficiencies are going to be, and what the desired outcome is for the county, right? I mean, you guys can do really anything you want to do. It's our job to tell you, what you can do, but what that could cause in terms of efficiencies or inefficiencies in the
Or
way that you want
cost,
to do that, or cost
versus
Correct.
this versus that. I mean,
Correct.
so many people that I've talked to says it's very difficult for you to take a 30-year-old existing jail, go in and say, okay, we're going to do a major renovation on it, continue to pass today's DOC standards for secured prisoners. It's very hard to do that in an existing building. So my thoughts behind that is put your secured pod new and renovate that for your unsecured or semi-secured, what's the proper word for work release and semi-secured?
For residential programs.
Yeah, the problem with that is, and a big advocate for those programs, and we do have programs in the jail now that we work in conjunction with community corrections, the therapeutic communities and things like that, which put a huge hamper on us trying to classify inmates. The issue with expanding community corrections and more programs is, I see a lot, in just my opinion, but I also see them come to us. I see a lot of opportunity granted and a lot of people that I think are set up for failure, that are given, okay, we're gonna put you on work release, even though this is your 8th drug arrest. And now I've seen both sides of it, but expanding community corrections and kind of talking in that regard, the programs that work, I would rather see the people at our jail going through programs at our jail, community corrections be separate, but expanding to a huge, I know that I'm getting ahead of myself, but expanding community corrections much past what it is, and the amount of participants that they have, I think would be setting some people up for failure, just in my opinion. I think the jail and having them go through the programs there in conjunction with them, it's just a different mindset. When you're in jail, you're in a secure facility, you know you're looking at this stuff instead of, you know, we're going to let you go out here and you know, sometimes fail, sometimes not. But when they're in jail, it's a different mindset for the inmates sometimes. So in theory, that would be great. But administration, to me, obviously I'm a short timer, I got 2 years. I would love to see administration connected to the pod, to the jail, not on a separate site, not connected, because I know how many times we've had to run back there to help in situations.
I would most definitely think that it needs to be.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, from a design standpoint, that you can think about is, you know, how do you provide for the programs that the sheriff wants to conduct in the jail itself? One of the things that we've seen is a desire or a need for smaller day rooms, classification day rooms. So you can put inmates of a certain kind who are trying to follow a certain path in one day room, and they have more of a tendency to come out of that, you know, in better shape than they went in. And so a lot of the programming can be done in the day room itself, so you don't have to move them to another classroom to do that. So providing a space where they can live and learn and, you know, rehab themselves in that space itself. So more smaller day rooms, more classification, gives you the ability to spread those inmates around and put them with the right group so that their chances of, you know, getting out is higher. So, you know, things like that, putting that into the design would definitely be the way we'd recommend. This is the second floor off the same housing pod that you saw below. So you can see now that the control room is there. You're looking down into each of the day rooms. You have your sight and sound separation. As Pete mentioned, you know, you can put men, women in adjacent day rooms and you don't have to worry about it. The beauty of this system also is that you can move inmates from one day room to the other without having to worry about whether there's a sight and sound issue. If tomorrow for some reason there's 20 more women in the facility than you had planned for, you can take up 2 blocks next to each other or on opposite ends of the pod and put women in there and not worry about that group being able to look at the men next to it. So again, you're using the inherent design of the pod system to give you the benefits of that sight and sound separation, the classification that you want in a facility like that. So instead of fighting design, you're using that to give you what is the best for the operation of the facility. Second floor, again, in the support spaces, that could be administrative spaces, that could be break rooms for the sheriff's staff, that could be a lot of different types of spaces, since you're not worried about, you know, security at that level. In Johnson County, we are putting a stair on the outside where staff can come in, come up the stair, and come directly up into the second level. They've got their locker rooms, break rooms, and they can, you know, start work from there and then go down to the inmate level. And so again, using the inherent qualities of the pod to design it so that it gives you what you need. This is a section through a typical day room. You can see the cells at the back. You have your rear wall, which again is not your security perimeter. The chase is your separator between your detention areas and your maintenance areas. That exterior wall could be built of glass or out of paper for you care. If it's downtown, you want to make it look good, you can put brick, limestone, whatever fits with the neighborhood. If you're building it out on a greenfield site, it could be metal panel. You don't want to necessarily spend the money on the exterior of a building when it doesn't need to, look as good as it should look downtown. You have your day room spaces in the center. You have your control rooms looking down into those day rooms. Again, this is your single pane separation between your control room and your housing units, which we feel is the most efficient way to do this. This is a comparison of what we have seen in the past. The one to the left is what the pod we just talked about. The one to the right is the same size pod, but doing the double envelope glass like we've seen. You have the control room at a slightly elevated level. It could be 3 feet, it could be 8 feet above, and then you have the double hallway around that, and then you have your 2 panes of glass that you're looking through. A couple of issues with this. One is the size of the pod. For the same size pod, because there is a standard requirement for the amount of space you need for inmates, you're going to lose 44 beds in keeping the pod the same size. If you wanted to keep that 264 beds like you have on the left in this pod here, you'd have to add about 5,000 square feet of construction to the project. That's about $2 million worth of cost that you're adding, trying to force this kind of a scenario in your design. So work with what the design allows you to do and take the benefits of that rather than forcing this double glaze system. You have 2 layers of glazing. That's more expensive than single layer of glazing. Chances of inmates messing with that glazing, again, there you go. You've got maintenance issues there. Observability becomes an issue because you are now at a lower level looking down, looking directly into day rooms. Whereas if you were on an elevated control room looking down, you had better observability from there. Cost, again, you're saving on the cost of the glazing. And the size of the facility itself, that's being reduced by $2 million. And your maintenance, you don't have somebody breaking glass and somebody having to get new glass every time somebody does that. So again, from an operations, from sight and sound separation, you have much more flexibility with the pods the way we have shown rather than this double glaze system. This is a view out of a double glazed control room. There is 2 panes of glass you're looking through. It can get very dark. It's hard to look directly into the day rooms. You are relying on cameras, and that's great, but sometimes you want that visibility directly into day rooms. That's a single pane of glazing between control room and day rooms. There's a big difference between the clarity and the visibility and the observability. And inmates who feel they're being observed more tend to behave a little better than inmates that feel that they can get away with stuff. So.
Joey's nodding his head.
Mom and Dad are gone.
So here's how things we've done this in the past, similar designs. Again, you've got your control room, you've got your 2 panes of glass. And your sight and sound separation. How do you address females looking at males or vice versa? You put drapes up on your glazing. And you've got to move your drapes every time you want to move inmates or women from one day room to the other. So the last thing you want to do is spend $20 million on a jail and then go buy some drapes for that. So here's a photograph of that center core that our pods would suggest you look at. You have doors all around. You have shutters in front of the doors. So there is no communication between doors. You can have this door open and the door to the recreation open, and inmates can let themselves out and walk to the recreation without staff involvement. Again, this is giving the sheriff the flexibility to do and manage the facility with the least amount of resources that he can possibly get. So again, we're not compromising the safety of the staff. We're not compromising the safety of the inmates, but we're allowing it to function efficiently. Here's some typical, housing types. You got your 2-mans, 4-mans. Again, we recommend that you look at showers and toilets built into the cell. It allows you to lock them down for longer periods of time if you need to, and not have to worry about giving them access to plumbing facilities outside. You're managing the water with the system that Pete just talked about, but you're not taking away the benefits of being able to lock them in there.
What about, is there any, we call them scream alarms, is there anything in the cell? I'm just thinking like...
Chirpers? Yeah, chirp alarms, yep.
Yeah, if something would happen and one of the guys goes in the shower and tries to, harm himself.
Absolutely. That is technology being leveraged to your benefit. So again, there's going to be a point with PREA and all that stuff that's coming down the pipe. There's going to be a point at which cameras in cells is going to be something that possibly could happen. And we designed the cells so that you have the ability with the rear chase to put a camera in the corner. You're not looking at the toilets, you're not looking into the showers. You can use alerts and alarms for that, but you still have the ability to look through a camera into the cells. So again, we're designing for the future so that you're thinking about 10 years from now, what are going to be the changes in design that I can incorporate and building the cells to accommodate those kinds of changes.
That's a big thing for us now is the showers. I mean, it's, guys, I was told, I don't know if that's true, when they built that in '89, I was told they knew at the time that it wasn't up to standard for the inmate shower ratio. So.
This is that rear chase that we were talking about, again, making sure that it's outside the security perimeter, all your maintenance gets done in there. You've seen some of these photographs on the left. That's what some of your chases probably look like. And on the right, this is what a good maintenance, intensive or easily maintainable chase would look like. You've got the scissor lift that can go run up and down. Again, all of your maintenance is done from the back of the cells.
So again, inefficient versus efficient, right? When we're getting there, cost. That always comes at a cost when you've got to do maintenance, right? So maintenance that is easy to do is easily done and gets done, so you're not doing something in the jail because you can't get to it, right? Or you've got to move people you can't move at that point in time. So it's really what that whole type of design is built after, is understanding that these facilities are necessary evil for the community, but trying to absolutely leverage the tax dollar to the full extent so your taxpayer gets the most benefit. I know that's kind of tough when you're talking about jails, right? But still, it is a taxpayer benefit to have a jail in a community. So you want that tax dollar going as far as humanly possible when you're housing these folks.
Where's the transport? Like, I've not been in there, but at our jail, but they have garage and...
Sallyport? Again, that would be outside in an administration area, right? So that's in addition to what you're going to have here. We're showing you the housing pod now, and we can get into administration here.
So you've got intake and booking where the inmates are brought in, you process them before you put them in general housing. You have a medical facility that could be in the pod, or it could be a separate unit attached to the intake and booking. You have kitchens, you have laundries. All of that is part of what we're going to need in the facility, whether it's part of the existing in the remodel or it's part of the new. That's the part of the discussion that's going to have to be dealt with. So again, constructability, a big issue, budget and flexibility. How do you manage a budget, manage systems, manage materials that you're going to use, manage the size of the project, and then have the flexibility so that on bid day, you're not stuck with a bid that's $3 million over what you had anticipated, and you can't put that shovel in the ground. And what do you go back and cut out at that point? So again, thinking of that ahead of time, can we design the facility, can we plan for it so that if, unfortunately, if there's a situation where we are over budget, can we still get a majority of what we want and do an alternate for some of the parts that could be done in the future. But again, planning for that, for the future. Here are some of the locations that we are doing projects in. Purples are under construction. We've got a few in design right now, and so again, very familiar with the state and with the current design trends. Here's what I was talking about with the center core. So you had the flexibility of design. The Y just disappeared from the flexibility. I don't know why. Maybe it's a font thing. But anyway, so you build a box. You've got your support spaces that you want in the center core. You've got your rec spaces. You've got your control rooms. You've decided on what you want in terms of isolation cells, classrooms, medical, whatsoever. So now what do you do with the rest? You can build out half a pod in that area. So you got the core, you got half a pod. That could be 100 cells, that could be 120 cells. You don't have to build out the rest, although you do design it now. You can design each wedge as a separate bid item, and you can ask on bid day for a price for each of those wedges. So that when the numbers come out on bid day, you can say, I can afford to do 3/4, and maybe the rest of it is just going to sit empty. We did that on Greene County, we did that on Posey County. In Greene, they actually were lucky and fortunate on bid day that the prices came in really good and they could take the entire pod. In Hamilton County, they didn't take half the pod. But again, you're thinking about how do I plan for that for the future. So you have options to do each of those wedges as a separate item.
What if you do part now and you need more later? Is it going to be available?
Is it going to be what, excuse me?
Available?
Oh,
Or, you know, oh, we don't have that anymore. You got to do something different.
steel cell has been around for 25, 30 plus years. Back when I started, I hate saying that, but back when I started, we were building cells out of masonry. They were not as durable. They had maintenance issues. The steel cells definitely are the way to go. And in 25 years, we've never had any issues with them. I honestly don't think we'd ever see them go away. There's no downside to the steel cell. They're way less, they're quicker to build, they're easy to maintain, they last forever. I mean,
This is it's an interesting thing, and we can make that option available. Anybody who wants to go down to steel cell, the steel cell folks bring those guys down there all the time to look at the facility. And there's been a reduction in the amount of kind of jail cell providers in the United States over the last 10 years. I think we're down to like 3 or 4 now, right? 3. And I mean, it's unbelievable. So, but steel cell, for the most part, has from the Mississippi East virtually everybody's business. And there's a reason why they have everybody's business. They're incredibly efficient, right? They deliver an absolute top-end product. And I'm going to give Sanjay and his team, Eric Rufflin, I think you guys have met, a bunch of kudos here. They went down, you have a number of design teams that go in there, and you can design a jail cell to any specific size, shape that you want to design. You can make them 8, and you can do all sorts of different things. What these guys went down there and did is spent 2 full days working with the engineering staff at Steel Cell to say, how do you buy your materials? What sizes do they come in? What's the best size for a door? What's the best size for a cell, right? Because now when we put a design into Steel Cell, they go, oh, it's RQAW. RQAW has 3 or 4 design shells, so we take RQAW 1, 2, 3, 4. They already have engineering drawings to bring down there. And it lines up perfectly with the way they buy materials, right? So it comes at a better cost, and it comes at a better time, because they don't have to do all the engineering work for it. And they did the same thing with Titan Door, who was also down in Georgia, I believe. Is that true? Mm-hmm. And so all those doors are made to that particular size, shape, configuration, etc. So they can be delivered at a rapid pace or a more rapid pace, obviously depending upon steel, but as that goes in. And it just makes the design and the efficiency for deliverability to a county that much better.
one of the things on flexibility is type of housing and the costs that you might save. Dormitories can definitely save you between 15 and 18%. So if you took a piece of the pod itself, you could look at converting some of those to dorms. You could look at multiple dorms.
You see the difference, right? There's no cells on the front of those. So those are totally open to the day room.
This is an all dorms.
All dorm, right.
This is one we're doing in Hancock County right now. It's all dorms. And again, you as the owner have the flexibility to do it within the confines of that same pod, and you either choose to have the dorms. I think, some dorms might be a good idea. Some sheriffs feel otherwise, and so it's your design. You make it what you want it to be.
What's the pluses and the minuses between the two of them?
Well, to me, like when we talk about some dorms, I think of like your inmate workers, usually a pretty good group for the most part. Maybe your therapeutic communities, those that you could do that with. That's kind of how community corrections is kind of dorm style in a way. But the other is, separating them, putting them in cells is your, more hardcore guys or girls that are having issues, and you need to separate them for the night, or you can lock them down in their own day room, or in their own section, block, whatever. But I think there'd definitely be a few that we could do dorm style. We could do for sure.
And it's so it goes back to the classification.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's it's maybe your misdemeanors or things like that. You might be able to do some dorm. How's the shower and bathroom stuff working at dorms?
So we would have one corner off that day room dedicated to showers and toilets. We wouldn't spread them out across the entire day. So again, there are cost savings. You want to be careful how much you use. It limits your ability to lock inmates down, but it does give you that flexibility, on the costs and the type of inmates that you have in there. Maybe it incentivizes, moving from a cell to a dormitory. Maybe the space is a little nicer, maybe the furniture is a little nicer. So there's a reason for them to try and want to move out of the cell day rooms into a dormitory type space. So again, it gives you a lot of things that you sometimes don't, think about.
Part of that rehabilitation.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, we put some trust in you, you're doing
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, you can always go back to the cells if you don't behave, but
We'll reclassify you. Really.
Absolutely.
Forwards or backwards?
So give you the tools to use to manage the. Here's a little bit about the exteriors. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do that. That's Putnam County in Florida. That's Washington County in Indiana. That's Green. That's Knox County, Marshall County. It's all precast. Hamilton County, of course, because they're Hamilton County, they want the brick and all the fancy stuff. But again, the exterior of the building.
County just looks like a factory.
Yeah.
It's prefab.
There's nothing wrong with
Factory
it.
building going up until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Prefab, no, I think there may be a ribbon around the bottom, which may be masonry, I don't remember.
But again, you don't need to spend the money where you don't have to.
Yeah.
Spend it where you want to.
But Hancock County truly looks, from
It
40,
looks-
looks like a factory building.
Absolutely. And it's out in the middle of a Greenfield, and it's fine where it is.
Just 2
Setback.
weeks ago, I thought it was another factory coming to town.
Did we go back?
Yeah, you went backward, right?
Okay. A couple of things I just want to hit. Leveraging technology, again, one of the ways that we feel that we bring more to the table for design is our VR system. Again, this is a set of goggles that you put on your head, and you can actually navigate in the 3D model of the facility itself before a single block is laid. There's been one instance where one of our guys, Eugene, calls me up at 8 in the evening and goes, "We have a blind spot." And I go, "No, we don't." And he said, "Sure we do." And we found a blind spot in the model itself because he was playing with it, And we fixed it, and we didn't have an issue once it was built. We have sheriffs coming, and Brett Clark from Hendricks County. If he could spend a week with these goggles on and navigate his facility before it's even built, he'd love to do that. So we had to kind of limit him on that. But it's
Moving
great
walls,
technology.
once they're
Yeah.
built, gets very expensive,
Yeah.
okay? Moving walls when they're still in a Revit 3D model, not so expensive.
Yep, we can do that all day long, and that's the time to do it. So again, leveraging technology, using Bluebeam Review, again, collaborating with other parts of the system, so security electronics, things like that, again, making sure that making sure you're getting what you want. And BIM is the 3D modeling software. So this is a quick video of a facility. Again, this is Hamilton County. And this is a 3D model, which will load up eventually. Okay.
It's coming up.
Yep, there you go. This is in the control room looking at the housing. You saw some photographs of that. The right side is all empty. You can see that empty shell just sitting there waiting for cells. Again, this is with your 3D goggles, looking at the model. You're looking at what you're going to get, and you can make changes. You can modify it. You can eliminate. You can change spaces, and it's all part of the design process that we feel brings a little bit more to the solution that works for you. This is going down the stairs to the lower level. Again, this is how the staff would get through to the lower level if they needed to address an event. They still have the ability to use the control rooms.
All right.
Sorry, go
Is there an elevator to the?
Typically, we have not provided elevators,
Okay.
but if we've attached to a two-story administration wing, we could. There's no requirement for an elevator.
That's
but
what I was.
yeah.
Right.
And we just had an officer that got injured that I was just trying to think, well, I wonder how he'd have got up the steps. But
Okay.
I figured.
And again, continuing in one of the cell blocks here, there's a cane mesh screen up top.
And you've seen photographs of all these. Again, your combination of 2-man, 4-man. So this is the model. So it's really lifelike. It's as close to being in the physical product that's built when we're all said and done, but you're seeing where your problems are, you're seeing where the issues are. How would I fix it? Or is there a blind spot behind the stair? You're taking care of that when you can easily within the model and during the design phase of the project. Is four-man cells looking in. Again, you can see the food passes in the doors. Again, you're allowing the sheriff the ability to lock people down and still feed them and manage that population. And whether you use it every day or not, you have that flexibility.
So the two-man or four-man cells, same square footage?
No.
No.
So there's a minimum requirement by the ACA
So
standards.
you don't go in there and build that as a two-man with the intent to down the road for expansion and make it four?
No, that's you want to think ahead of time and say, I want so many two-mans, I want so many four-mans, and then plan on having the bunks in place. Because, again, these things come prefabricated. You don't want to be welding stuff to this interior coating that is really, it's like rhino.
I was wondering about, I guess, cost effectiveness. Okay, we may want to double the size of this jail, so can we build that cell block or that cell to accommodate 4 people but only use 2? Or
I see
is
what
it
you're
cheaper
saying.
to leave half the building empty?
Again, that all comes down to the cost factor, Gary, as you guys are going through this process, right? We can configure it and look at it in both manners. You can put some two-man in for the more hardened guys and some 4 and some dorm and take a look at the cost and you go, well, we've got some room there. Let's spread those out. Let's put more 4, more dorm, or more 2s. And that's the whole process that you guys are going to go through. Trying to drive to a number of population that's not only going to satisfy your current needs, but future needs potentially. The other side that you want to make sure of is you're at about 100% capacity when you're 85% full, 80% full?
80%.
Yeah, 80% full for classification purposes. So even though it says you have 250 beds, your real number is closer to whatever that would be, 210, right? 205, right? And that, because it allows him, the classification purposes, to make sure they're not sitting on top of one another. I don't believe you probably have that now, do you?
No comment.
Yeah, so that's what's taken into account there. And when you're building these things, the other side of it is that when you're looking at it, if you really think the county's going to grow and expand, you're in a growing county and this is going to really get out, that's where you're looking for additional footprint to have an extra pod or, and start adding that way is what we talked about. Thinking about it from not only today, but looking at it 20 and 30 years down the road, what those needs are going to be. Because you could build today what's going to cost you an immense amount of money 30, 40 years from now. And at least get it to the point where you can expand it and do it correctly at the least cost for your citizens.
I
think we started again.
Can I stop it? All right. So that's kind of Jail Design 101. All right, so we talked about what are the good things to look for. What is, what's the latest trends in jail design? How do you future-proof yourself a little bit? How do you plan for that future? So getting down now into, the specifics of Fayette County, I mean, there's a series of bullet points or questions that you need to be asking yourself and to help you come down to what is the right solution for Fayette County. So, obvious question is, where do you build it? You could definitely go to a greenfield site. We've done projects there where Hancock County was a great example. The existing jail was downtown. We designed a facility right downtown next to that facility, and the mayor goes, "You are not putting a jail in my backyard."
Although we did convert the jail, we're in the process of converting that jail to community corrections and work release.
And so, that was, so that is definitely a possibility.
Right.
So question is, does a jail need to be downtown? Sure, it has its benefits. Is it more economical to move it off-site? There's a transportation issue to think about.
So Hancock County is not moving the judicial?
No.
No, so
Down-
they just
down
moved the
the
jail.
middle, so
And
just-
it was a unique situation because they left the administration downtown in the existing jail, and they built the jail in the greenfield site. And then 8 months later, they go, I think we want to move the administration to it, so we
So
are
that
now.
was an afterthought.
That's an afterthought.
So we designed, we had the room and
planned for it.
space, and we planned for it.
We had planned for it. We knew exactly where the administration would go. We didn't design it. But when they said we want to move administration, we knew exactly what to do and moved it there. And so now they're in the process of building that. So again, building yourself that forethought in your design to say, okay, what if I want to do this 5 years from now? What if I want to do this 10 years from now? Plan for that so that you're not going to be stuck in a corner where you go, I don't know what to do now. I'm out of space, I'm out of room, whether it's downtown or on a greenfield site. You've got to think of those kind of options. So again, what are the pros and cons of keeping it downtown? There is that land that you got to purchase, the car dealership. I'm not sure what he's asking, but that could be an area of concern. With downtown construction, you've got some costs that's associated with the type of building that you're going to build. There's a look that you're going to want to achieve in the downtown environment. Can it be a pre-engineered metal building looking like a barn? Sure, it could. Do you want it? Probably not. So, there's a cost associated with that. Construction downtown can always be a little more challenging. There's street closures, there's things like that you got to think about. So again, can it be done? Absolutely. Is it the right choice? Could be. Are there other ways to look at it? I think it's worth the look. When you come to a decision and say, check this box, this box, this box, this box, at the end of the day you've come up with a decision matrix that says this is the best solution for Fayette County, and it's at the right cost with the right expandability options, and all of that being considered. And I'll run through this. I think some of it we've already talked about. The Sheriff's Administration, like I mentioned, does it remain downtown? Does it move off-site? Do you do that now? Do you do that in the future? I mean, the existing jail could very well be the administration center for the Sheriff's Office, but then you have that issue of transportation, where Sheriff says, I can't support the jail when I need to. So then again, when you start answering these questions, it starts, filtering it down to very simple basics of what needs to be done. Bed needs, again, you've got a bed need from your study of 291 beds in that range, I believe, and that's for 2040, that's what it's projecting. What if that number changes? What if suddenly level 5s are being sent from state back to the county? Very well happen in the next 5 years, I don't know. And then what do you, that 291 numbers out the window, you got to think about 350 beds that you got to incorporate. How do you plan for that? Even if you're building it downtown, do you have a location where another pod can be put so that you can still manage that kind of population? It does become easier off-site, but again, those are other things that you want to think about, and we can help you plan that process. Again, we talked about flexible multi-use spaces, thinking about the future. Your control points, I talked about $1 million per control room, how much it takes to operate those things. That second point there, build as much as needed or can afford in today's dollars. So you're designing as much as designing on paper is the cheap way, right? It's the most economical way to go. It's us putting some money on paper, drawing some lines, and then on bid day you get the option to either build it or not. So you're giving yourself the flexibility to make sure you have a project on bid day and not find yourself locked out without a solution. So,
In your experience, how many years does the jail become obsolete? Like this jail is obsolete, so is it like so many years for all the changes that your jail will become obsolete or not up to what it needs to be?
I think if you don't plan well enough, you can see your jail being obsolete within 15, 20 years. If you build in the flexibility, build in the expandability, so that in the future, you're going to have to do maintenance and stuff like that. That is given. No system's going to last you forever. 20 years from now, you might need a new roof. You might need new mechanical systems. But again, it's the types of things that you don't think about that cause the building to get obsolete, right? Do I have flexible spaces for programming in the future? Do I have enough classification that can give me the options to manage the population as I'd like to? Is it staff efficient? The materials that you use to build a facility, they might require some work, but unless you put those kinds of efforts at the beginning of the project when you're laying it out, doing the master plan, thinking about the future, there's no reason why a facility can't be a 50-year facility. With the right amount of forethought, the right planning, the right materials, the right systems, I can say 50 years easily. Operational efficiency, again, whatever you do with your design, make sure that that one aspect of the project is absolutely nailed down, because you will spend a fortune operating a facility that is not designed right. So again, making sure that your control points are down to a minimum. You have as many inmates around a single point, and you have the ability to manage that facility as efficiently as possible. The Dollar General building, again, what's the value of the land versus what's the value of the building itself? There is some upgrades required to the building. You're going to have to spend some monies to do that, and then what are the potential uses of that facility? Does it make sense to make it into a women's community corrections building? I didn't really see any statistics or projections for the amount of community corrections beds that Fayette County needs, and maybe I missed it, but it's important to make sure that you're not building too many community corrections beds. That it sounds good on paper sometimes to say we will reduce the need in this jail, but eventually you find people just circulating back into the jail, and then you have less beds in the jail than you actually should have planned for. So again, is the land more valuable if you are staying downtown, because that whole area could be a larger jail facility designed correctly to the current standards. So maybe there's, what do you do with the facility that, you're tearing down to put a jail there? What happens to community corrections during that time? Are you going to find another facility to temporarily house them? Or, so that's the kinds of questions that, and I'm sure some of these came up during the study. But again, these are, filtering it down to some basic questions that we need to answer, so we come up with an answer, a solution that works.
You were talking about 35 to 39,000
Square feet.
Per pod.
Per pod to maximize it.
What kind of footprint are we talking about?
So I think it was 170 by 170, yeah. So definitely space downtown to put it next to the jail. There's definitely an opportunity to do that. You might want to think about, the existing work release facility. What happens to that if that thing gets torn down?
So
you could go to the
go to the south of the existing jail building.
Yes.
And
put
fit
that
in that footprint.
in the Dollar General. That's definitely, the Dollar General it's perfectly workable as a
Well, east
community
of that
corrections.
block, I figured 150 by 260 would work there. I came up and you could connect it to the old jail. And I don't know if it would work where you could convert the old jail into work release and sheriff's department combination, parking lot behind. I don't know.
I mean, I guess what I've always thought about was our existing building already has a cafeteria, the kitchen facilities, it's got laundry facilities, it's got administration facility. And if you put a modern pod on that facility, it lessens the cost. And even if we said, okay, we're going to do 3/4 of a pod or half a pod, it would lessen our costs even more. And then you take our cell block area and you renovate it for work release, community correction programs, and so on and so forth. That's what I was trying to maul through my head. I mean, because if you do away with the jail, usage of the jail, now all of a sudden the basement of the jail facility becomes more usable. Because that is our mechanical chase with our current design,
Right.
where it's basically wasted square footage.
As soon as you take out the detention from that
Yes.
building, yeah, definitely you can use that for multiple.
Now we can,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, we almost double our square footage
Mhm.
of our existing building. Usable space, it becomes usable space then. That was just thoughts that I've mauled through my head, trying to maintain as much of our bricks and mortar that we can, and utilize our existing bricks and mortar.
An existing jail with, some upgrades to systems, to use it as a non-detention facility. The bones are there,
Yeah,
so that's definitely an opportunity to make that into something other than detention, if you're going to build a detention right next to it.
but if you've got to answer the question of what do we do with our several $100,000 a year operation of
Operation
community
cost.
credit?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while we're building, until we get there. Because we just can't shut off those grants. I mean, we don't want to shut off those grants coming to the county just for 2-year construction period or whatever it might be.
So, the Dollar General could very well be community corrections. Is it the right location? Is it, if you're going to
If
do
it's
that?
not sitting in the way.
If it's not sitting in the way,
Yeah.
and maybe it's not sitting in the way now. Maybe 20 years from now, when you want to add another pod,
It
that
might be.
it could be
Or
gone.
finish the
Or-
pod.
Right. So again, you're thinking about how to plan for that, because you don't need to build everything now that you need for 20 years. Build what you can
Well,
afford.
it comes back down to what Fayette County can afford.
I think we work backwards too.
Yeah.
And Hancock County Council goes, this is our budget, that's it. And so we work backwards from that and maximize the number of beds. We didn't build them the brick exterior that they wanted and things like that, or, but there's ways to work with that, so.
We have to look at what Fayette County can build for the revenue that we have. Basically, because we're taxed to death already.
Sure. One of the things, Gary, that, and we haven't gotten into any yet, so I don't think this is in our slide presentation, but is delivery method of the jail, right? There's a variety of delivery methods that are available here in Indiana to use to go ahead and do facilities. Many of you folks are, you understand design build. That's the way everybody's done it. You hire a design team, they design it, and then you get the builder to go ahead and build that design, right? And there's some collaborative efforts in there, but really you can end up with a design that then all of a sudden the contractor comes in there and says, I can't build that for the dollars that you want. So there's not that full collaboration. You've got a CMA, which is construction manager as advisor. Again, that would be hired by the county. The architect would also be hired by the county, so there's still that separation. There's no liability, really. There's no what I call skin in the game for the contract manager at that point under CMA. There's something called the CMC, which is construction manager as constructor. Okay, where they absolutely do have skin in the game because they've got to give you a guaranteed maximum price. But there again, you're hiring your architect out separately from that. So you get two people still working and you're kind of operating up there as the manager or the overseer, owner of that whole project. There's an additional one called the build, operate, transfer, which I think I talked to you guys a little bit about before, which really puts the onus on a development group that says the county has said you have X dollars of availability payment annually. Then that group turns around and says, okay, this can be leveraged out to X dollars, right? So then you start getting in this collaborative effort with your architect, your constructor, the development group, to go ahead and all come together and figure out what could be attained with those dollars, working hand-in-hand conjunction with that, and then going to a contract. The difference with a lot of these methods, and there are many, but with a build, operate, transfer, the county lays out $0 until the building is turned over to them at substantial completion. $0. There's nothing that goes on to the county. So that's a 2-year period of time. If you were to start today in any one of those methods, you're looking at about a 6-month design process, and you're looking at about an 18-month build process for any particular project on average, right? So during that time, if you were to go design build, CMA, CMC, you're going to hire the design team, you're going to pay that design team too, because they're going to do the work. So they got to get paid during that point in time, during that period. Then you're going to go ahead and put it out for the constructors. You're going to have to probably float a bond anticipation note to pay for construction or construction financing through that thing, and then you got to get into the bonding to pay for the jail unit itself for the construction. Underneath the bond, you're given that this is our budget number. Our budget number is X. So we're going to deliver this, and we've all agreed upon this design for this cost at this price at this timeline. Okay, then that's all put down into a contract. The owner sign off. You, the owner, sign off on what's going to be delivered. The developer signs off on who's going to build it, and it comes at a guaranteed maximum price. Okay, so you get the CMC advantage there, and then at that point it goes to what's called financial close. Okay, because you've said we're going to back that with the monies that we have annually, and you guys can prove that to the financial institution which does that. They're going to go to financial close. Then they're going to pay the designers. They're going to pay the construction loan. They're going to pay all the way up until that building is turned over to the county, at which point then you start making either bond payments or lease payments, whichever way you want to go, and you can go either way. And currently, Wabash is currently working with USDA on a 40-year note to do this exact project under a bond, a build, operate, transfer, because they get to have that money. I think that's currently at 3.8 from what I heard from the USDA. Okay, which if you look at 3.8% money, that is free money if you start taking a look at it on a 40-year basis, even at a 2% cost of living increase annually, right? I mean, it's essentially free money. The cost of money today is ridiculously cheap in anybody's eyes. Yes, it's borrowing. Yes, you have to do that and leverage it out. But you have to figure out how to leverage as much as you can. So you can do 20-year or 25-year bonding, which is out there today. The last deal which we did just for a smaller deal up in Daleville, Indiana, for a $4.1 million project, the rate is 1.8%. That's what that transaction is at. That's being delivered also as a build, operate, transfer. So they don't pay a dime until that building is delivered. The construction of the Delaware County facility, which is $47 million, okay, the county has not paid one dime yet, okay, towards that building, because we're turning it over on November 15th, at which point then they'll turn that over, and then that's when their obligation begins. So again, there's a lot of leveraging with that build, operate, transfer that you should certainly consider when you're doing these projects now. And it's not that new of an idea. It's being used now widely throughout the state, widely. So again, there's a lot of things to consider as you go through that process. We, being BW Development, which is one of our groups that is a common ownership, along with RQAW, has delivered 6 build, operate, transfers currently in the state. Currently, the largest vertical construction in the state is the Delaware County project. So we're very familiar with the legalities and how to get through that, etc. We've also done CMA. We've also done design build. We've also done CMC. So all of these things, we're very familiar with those processes as well. And they all have advantages and disadvantages of each. So you should certainly look at that as you're going through. But really what you're trying to identify, in my opinion now, as a county, is saying what funds do we have available, right, on an annual basis. So you don't want to we can only afford to build $10 million. That's not the number you really need to focus on. You need to focus on the leverageability of the dollars that you have. What can we leverage them out to, right? Because in today's market, the rates are so good right now. I get stymied by the rates that are out there. So that's really more the number you need to focus on. And then whether you go to USDA at 3.8% for 40 years, or you go to a bond at whatever rate for 25, or you go into a municipal lease type arrangement, at 20 years. I mean, all those are options for you guys as you look down at this project. So really, that's kind of the number you guys all need to kind of chew on to figure out where you need to go. Because the last thing you want to do, in my opinion, and this is taking work away from us, is hire a designer that's going to design you a building you can't build, right? That you just can't do. So really, the important work is now back to you on council and the commissioners to say, Fayette County has a need. How do we solve that need, and what can we do for X dollars? Now, I'm very good with that because I spent 24 years in banking. Okay, so you're on my side of the game now, not Sanjay's side of the game. So I can very quickly determine what leverageability you folks have in terms of the marketplace today and being able to deliver that project. So again, if you're looking at something that you're continually get funds on, I'm going to probably nudge you towards build, operate, transfer because you're still collecting those funds. You're not paying anything for 2 years. right? Or if you guys just don't like that method at all, you guys can choose another method, understanding you're going to pay as you go all the way up through there, and it will require, not only using those monies, but also doing bond anticipation notes, which have issuance costs, and bonds, which have issuance costs, and I keep saying that I want to come back as a bond attorney in my next life, knowing how much bonding Indiana does. So all those things come into play as you're looking at the overall picture of what you folks are doing. And again, I think you look at the expertise which RQAW has, and it's out there in the marketplace. It's very, very recent, along with going all the way back to 1954. You can see a lot of our projects and what has happened and delivered, right? And they've been delivered on time, on budget. I would very much encourage you folks to get out and actually walk through one of these facilities. I'm happy to take you through any one of these facilities that we have. I'd encourage you maybe to head up to Hamilton County. It's a good use because they actually did a master plan out there, and RQAW is a master planner of that particular site where they've got lots of room to move. Matter of fact, they had so much available land to them when they did it. This most recent time, they put in a solar field. They have a complete solar field on the outside, which is supplying, I can't remember how many percent of the jail electricity bill that's coming off of that solar field. I'll have to ask Mark Airbrand, who's one of the commissioners. I'll get that number for you. But it's providing a lot of electricity that's going back to that facility just because they had the space over there. I think the payback on that one was like 6 years. So, and that facility operated for 50 plus years out there without a problem. So a 6-year payback on that is pretty easy to do when you're looking at operating a facility for 50 years. Delaware County, I'd love to take you up at Delaware County. It finishes on November 15th. There's no one in there, so it's really easy to go tour and see a fully operational type of design, which we've shown you. That's got a lot more to it than what was there. But they went through this exact process that you've gone through. We did the study for them. They had a downtown site, which had courts underneath, jail on top, catty corner building, smack dab downtown Muncie, and we had to go through that building. I spent 2 days going through that with structural engineers and architects and everybody else. We looked at a greenfield site off by the airport that was over there, and then we looked at doing the adaptive reuse on the ASINS building. And we came back, the ASINS building was at $47 million complete. Now they're taking 6 courts, prosecution, everything judicial is moving out to that facility, everything. Clerk's office, everything's going out there, along with a jail pod and then redoing those. So it's not what you guys would do, but you still get to see a lot what goes into design. The downtown facility, we had estimated in a cost range around $70 million to redo that site. Only because of the current upgrades you'd have to do to the current facility. They wanted to keep it detention, which has caused more problems than turning it into just a work release. So I don't want to kibitz maybe what we may think about over here. But looking at a greenfield site to build that same facility, you're at $100 million plus on building that same facility at a greenfield site. So, there's lots of options. There's lots of ways to move. I'm just here to tell you that with the expertise that we have, not only in Sanjay and his team, but with the people that we have on staff, we do have construction managers on staff at our QEW, which work hand in hand with the architects, because I love my architects to death, but the construction managers keep them on point to say you can't do that because it costs too much money. They only have X amount of dollars. We need to do this, right? So it works very well, so we're able to quickly deliver you a product, maybe more so than if things were doing separately, where you get construction manager, architect out on the side. So, and again, I encourage all of you guys to come up to any one of these facilities. We can provide you a list of all the facilities we've done. You can call anybody you want and ask them what their thoughts are and what was built and what was delivered. Again, I think I want to finally finish up with the building is going to cost a lot of money, and people focus on the cost of the building. The real cost in these things are operational because they never go away. At some point, you're going to pay off the building, and then you're going to have to continue to operate this thing. So if you don't try to make those things as efficient and technology available today, okay, you're shorting yourself and your taxpayer. You've got to drive those systems to the most efficient as possible for the longevity of the use of people's tax dollars. I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm not saying you can't retrofit new lighting and things like that and new systems in those old buildings. We did it up at the ASINS building in Delaware County. It was done. So, but all those things come into play as you're doing this, because those are the real true costs. Manpower is an immense cost, right? So if you have way too many control points all around, because you've got 3 or 4 buildings you're operating, you've got staff here, staff here, staff here, staff here, and it gets pretty expensive because he's always coming back asking for more people, right? And we know what that costs. And again, those are forever costs. They just are. So, Again, we're available to answer any and all questions you guys have. Again, I would encourage you guys to call me. I will set up a meeting and get you guys into any one of these facilities that you guys want to see. Because I know looking at it on a flat screen is one thing. Walking around the building, walking inside of one of those jail cells is a unique experience that I think everybody who sits on your side of the table has to make that decision, looking your constituents in the eye. You can say you thoroughly researched everything possible when you actually walk through the facility before you pulled the trigger to go do it. So that's my last pitch to you is let us take you around to some of these facilities and get a look at them, because I think that is worth its weight in gold.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for them? Appreciate you coming down, and
I left copies of the proposal up front here, and also our business cards are down in front. So any questions you guys think of afterwards, please let us know. Let Mike know. Mike knows how to get a hold of me. I think most of the commissioners know how to get a hold of me. They got my cards as well. So, and again, we appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to come down here and speak in Fayette County.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Appreciate it, gentlemen.
You too. I'm happy to take you on that. So yeah, just let me
Motion to
know.
adjourn.
I want to do the
I
crazy
move
thing.
we adjourn.
We can introduce you to anything.
I tell you what,
All in favor, say aye.
I'm not putting
Be adjourned.
but it's very similar. I went through the rest of it.